Well, it's good afternoon, just a minute ago, and welcome to this really power-packed panel. I don't think you would have got, even in the current solar energy conference that is going on that side, this kind of experts to discuss, I think, what is a very critical subject here. Very quickly, of course, Sonal has already introduced them, but let me just go down the list with no particular order that's there. Amit Singh, CEO Adani Green Energy. Praveen Sinha, Doctor, I'm told, CEO and MD Tata Power. Suman Sinha, Chairman Renew. Mr. Ramesh Prasad Gupta, CMD Solar Energy Corporation of India. Dr. Arunabha Ghosh, CEO, CEEW, right? And Vineet Mittal, Chairman of Other Energy. And as you can see, you've got all the big boys in the renewable energy space. And I think it is at a very critical crossroads that we are there. We've done well on solar energy in some senses. If you look just at the India story, but if you look outside at our neighbor, there's a lot to do. And the challenge is very simple. We, as we had mentioned in the morning with the minister, we have to get into a target of 500 gigawatts of non-fossil fuel renewable energy by 2030. Out of that, solar is going to be around 300 gigawatts. Today, we are at 87 gigawatts. That means in the next 6 years, you have to do an average of 40 to 50 gigawatts to achieve that target. Now, here are the big boys that are supposed to do this. So I'm going to start with Praveen Sinha, CEO and MD of Tata Power. Praveen, here is the magnitude of the challenge. 2 to 3 minutes as to what you see are the big issues that we need to do, or big problems or issues that we have to tackle to get to that point.
First of all, thanks Raj and thanks India Today for getting me for this event. We have all the people who are in the renewable space present over here. So that speaks for India Today and their ability to get everyone from the industry. I think for India, the 500 gigawatt from the present about 200 gigawatt means that we need to add nearly 300 in the next 6 years. And this, of course, is a mix of solar, wind, storage. It would also mean nuclear and hydro. So I think there's a play for each of these areas. And fortunately, in our country, there is a demand, there is an appetite for this much power. And for us, this is about the energy transition that is taking place. The two areas that I think which is very important is that how do we make renewable power more reliable? And I think for that, we need to have now combination of solar, wind, storage. Storage can be battery storage, it can be pump storage, but any type of storage which will make the intermittent renewable power 24/7, I think that will be very important. And in our quest to reach the 300 gigawatt of clean energy that needs to be added, more of these projects will come so that the power supply becomes reliable. That's the important.
That's one, yeah.
I think in the last decade, it was about plain vanilla solar and plain vanilla wind. Now it's no more there. It has to be combined. The second aspect is how do we create the ecosystem for that? So how the DISCOMs are able to buy this. Their challenge always used to be that you are giving only power during certain hours of the day. So now if we give them the solution, that can be a good alternative for them for the traditional or conventional brown power that they have been using. Also, along with this, we will have to create the ecosystem for manufacturing. India has started and taken big steps of setting up manufacturing facility for cell module, especially in the solar space. But India already has good manufacturing capacity in wind space. And I do hear that there's a lot of talk about nuclear power also coming and the Bharat small modular reactor. So I think India needs to ramp up the pace at which the manufacturing for all these should happen so that we don't have a supply chain constraint and we are dependent on some other countries.
Let me take off from there and bring you, Amit Singh, into this, because you all are into the manufacturing of solar modules and the entire stream that is supposed to be there. What has been your experience, and where do you see the blocks and the positives and the negatives that you need to overcome?
Yeah, I want to build on what we just heard. I think if India wants to achieve, and I know we will achieve the targets, I think we need to look at both scale and speed. And the scale of backward integration when it comes to manufacturing today is largely the manufacturing setup today is putting together module, which is, I would say, a very tiny sliver of backward integration. I think we need to go down to polysilicon level, look at ingots, wafer, modules, cell, and then modules. And I think that whole value chain has to be looked at from bottoms up at a molecular level, and that needs to be done very rapidly. Otherwise, our reliance on foreign countries will not go away. So that has to be a lot more promoted through government incentives, through making sure that we have wider programs and investments in that direction. I also want to reflect on two things to bring speed. If you look at the delays of evacuation availability, if you look at what's happening in Gujarat and Rajasthan, I think it's quite profound, and I think it needs to be addressed. The Power Grid Corporation, ourselves, and many other players are participating, but I think the tendering process, the whole end-to-end has to be looked at, and that has to really speed up for everybody to then move very quickly. The other area which I would point out very quickly is, looking at the PSAs. I think a lot of tenders are now starting to happen. I think it's very, very important that the PSAs, the power supply agreements, are also signed with equal amount of agility by DISCOMs, which will give confidence to developers to then, take a FID and move with some kind of pace.
Your PSA meaning power supply agreements that you have with the states, that's there.
Yeah.
Suman, can we come to you and to address two questions. One is the fact that while we might be making the modules in the country, the solar modules, the other parts of the industry, we are heavily dependent on imported things. So there is a China factor that comes in. How do we deal and navigate with the China factor? What are the issues on that front? And of course, addressing some of the points of dealing with the states when you have to come into RPOs or getting them to to keep their commitments on this front.
Yeah, thanks, Raj. Look, both of those are very, very important questions. The first actually is very critical in terms of national security right now. If we want to have a domestic supply chain and not replace one kind of dependence of importing fossil fuels on to replace that with importing Chinese equipment, then we have to have a domestic manufacturing industry. And that's a decision that the government has fundamentally taken, but the implementation of that is not that straightforward, because obviously we need to install, this 50, 60 gigawatts every year as well. So without disrupting the whole process of installation, how do we move the whole supply chain into India? It's not an easy process, and we saw that in modules also, there was a little bit of back and forth that happened, but fundamentally now at least modules we've got within the country. But as you go further back in the value chain, it gets more and more capital intensive, gets more technology intensive, and people intensive and expertise intensive as well. So there we need to figure out how we're going to get access to that technology and that manufacturing equipment. And a lot of that is sitting in China. And it's not straightforward that the Chinese will just let us go there, pick it up and put it in India, and then disintermediate them as a little bit in the global value chain. So I think you'll see some tension there. But eventually, there is no solution but for us to localize the entire value chain in India all the way to polysilicon. And I think eventually, when the world starts looking at diversifying from China, India will be that natural other alternative, given cost of manufacturing in the country, as well as the scale of the domestic market that we have, which is likely to be the second or third largest market in the world after China. So I think it's going to take a few years, and it is going to require very enlightened government policy making. And we need that visibility out, because anybody who wants to invest will require that visibility of, are you going to prevent imports of let's say solar cells? Are you going to prevent imports of wafers eventually? and so on. So we'll need that visibility to come in before people are able to make investments. So that clarity of thought needs to come in from the government on the policy making. And I think if that happens, then there are a number of people who will be happy to invest in manufacturing. But I think it's going to take 5 to 7 years for us to actually localize the supply chain, if not longer. And there's one other angle which Arunabha talks about quite eloquently, which is the issue of partnering with some of the other geographies of the world, for example, the US and the European Union, to see if we can have preferential trade agreements with them to export equipment from here to those geographies as well. I think that's going to be a very important driver of demand for this domestic industry that we need to set up. Now, how to make that happen, again, requires a lot of trade discussions with those countries. So I think that's as far as your question on solar is concerned. On the DISCOM side, clearly we need a lot of reform, and that's one of the big areas in the power sector that has not yet been addressed. It's sitting with the state governments. The central government has tried a few things in the past. It's not really worked because of pushback from the state governments. But I think that is an area that does need to be reformed. And whether it is giving more licenses to distribute power, whether it is some other mechanism of separating wire and the content provider, whatever be the solution, we need that solution to come in, because if it doesn't come in, we don't actually have an effective working interface between the power sector and our eventual customers, right? And so that does need to be fixed quite importantly. And once that happens, you'll start seeing more demand coming in from the DISCOMs. Today, we have almost 30, 40 gigawatts of unsigned PSAs. And the longer they stay unsigned, the more people like us have to take price risk on those. So I think it's an area that I know Mr. Gupta at SECI is really working on quite a bit. And, we have a lot of engagement with them, and, they're trying their best. But ultimately, the DISCOMs have to step forward, and they have to convert the actual demand growth into actual PSA growth as well. And that is something that is not happening yet.
So that brings us to Mr. Rameshwar Prasad Gupta. segues well into the question that Suman talked about as CMD of Solar Energy Corporation of India. You may have to deal with some of this issue, but much larger. But let's deal with this particular issue. The central government did, in some senses, want to bring penalties for those states that were not complying with the rules. There was the Bureau of Energy Efficiency. There was apparently a note that was there to bring that about. Where does all this stand, and how can you drive it? Because you are also one of the key developers and expanders for renewable energy, the corporation that you had.
Well, I would say that last year central government amended the Energy Efficiency Act to provide for the renewable purchase obligation from central level. There is a fundamental difference. Earlier, the central government prescribed it, but it was left to the state regulatory commissions to determine the trajectory. And they were guided by a model trajectory given by the central government. Having seen it that has not worked, they changed it to a statutory mechanism, whereby now states will have to meet that obligation. Now it has become actually a statutory obligation, without the interference of either the state government or the state regulatory commission. Only thing is, the states so far, they have not got the full implication of it, which we are trying to educate to them. And fortunately, number of states which I have interacted and talked to them, they have understood it, and they are coming back for signing the PPA, and the pace now I have seen, it is improving. The other thing is, so far we were doing the tenders and auctioning for the product which we thought was better for the state. We have now started talking to the state and bringing the tender as per their requirement. We bring out a tender, it doesn't suit them, and of course they will not sign it. So talk to them, and I have been talking to the other REIAs also. Talk to the state, bring out the tender as per their requirement, and I would say that number of states, they express their desire for FDRE kind of tenders. And those tenders we brought out, and I think I will compliment the developers also. They, for the first time, in FDRE tenders, we have got a rate below 5 rupees.
Wow.
Which is, if we take a similar thermal power plant, probably it is at par currently, But if you take the future cost of thermal power, then renewable energy is still cheaper. Having said that, the DISCOMs and the state governments are still not assured of that FDRE or RTC kind of tender, they will actually fructify. So once that is a transition stage, which I am foreseeing in next 3 to 4 years, once we are able to set up the about 15 to 20 gigawatts of that FDRE or RTC kind of plants and able to supply them, that will assure the states that yes, this is workable and it will do. Then that will be a real turning point for renewable energy, which I foresee. Thank you.
I think that, Arunabha, if you come to your particular point, where we take off from what Suman said, the fact is that China, that's the elephant in the room, that we're highly dependent on it. How do we diversify our sources for imports? Now, America could play a role in some of these things. Which countries would you identify and say, okay, this is where we could make the movement on?
Again, let me add my thanks to the other to what the other panelists have said. Thank you, Raj, and thank you, India Today, for having me. It's energizing to be in these conversations. And I think there's something that both Sumant and Amit said that we need to tap into. Sumant highlighted the energy security challenge, and Amit gave us a hint of the how. See, it's not going to be the vanilla renewable story is done, right? And what Mr. Gupta is also saying, we've got a combination of solar plus storage and hybrid, etc., which basically is signaling from the policy side that we want a very diversified RE market in and of itself, right? What that does is it opens up the opportunity for many different value chains to be exploited. And Amit talked about that value chain. So I don't think, again, the next evolution of the manufacturing policy and the incentives should not be about simply let's assemble a panel. It's about, and I call it component-wise comparative advantage rather than product-wise comparative advantage. When you open up the product, you will see hundreds of components, right? Whether it's in a turbine, whether it's in a panel, whether it's in a battery. From the minerals all the way to the wires to everything else. Now, at CW, that's one of the things we're doing across the world. We're saying who has what kind of competency and comparative advantage. What is the gap between where India is with those countries? So what are the gaps we can quickly jump? And then what we can't jump, who do we ally with? That gives us a different kind of vision of not just saying China plus one, but India plus many, right? And that's a different narrative. This is a concern on energy security that not India's alone. Between 2012 and now, the number of countries in the world that had concentrated supplies of clean tech products, or solar for instance, increased from 38 to 71. For batteries, from lithium-ion batteries, from 19 to 49. So there are many other countries in the same boat, worried about the same things, and struggling with trying to solve it only on their own. And therefore, the formula that I have proposed in a Foreign Affairs article yesterday is that let's start with an India-US green trade corridor, right? Where we co-invest in each other, look at the clean energy subsidies, but also make sure that those subsidies then help to attract investments into India. And as Sunwant was saying, then we send it back out there. But again, component by component. So we are interdependent. And then we look at what Japan can do. Then we look at what Australia can do, what European Union can do, and so forth. So this formula allows us to not try and make our countries vertically integrated firms, but engage and position India as a critical, indispensable node in a global, resilient and reliable value chain on solar and other related products.
Thank you. I want to come right back home, and Vineet Mittal is the best person to do this. We had talked of the issues with the state government and the fact that they're not picking up the orders that you all, or their commitments. What are the solutions you would say if we had to get this whole thing moving? We can keep complaining against each other, but what are the concrete things that you think, 3 or 4 things that you think we need to do immediately and urgently, both the states and the center?
I think the best opportunity for India is that in India, everything to do with environment is a matter of central government. Central government goes and signs the commitment with the global government, whether it is the net zero target or how will our emission trajectory will go down. So from my perspective, to make it very efficient, the states have to be on the same page as center. And India has built a very good GST council concept where state and center are on the board, and they collectively decide one country, one taxation. So same way we should have one country, one power policies, and one kind of regulation. Even like today, if I have to set up a project in Rajasthan versus Gujarat, the whole even kV of voltage changes. 66 kV is there in Gujarat, it's not there in Rajasthan, it may not be there in Maharashtra. Every state has their own policies for approvals, and it takes a lot more time. And even the biggest challenge is land conversion. If solar is farming, like a farm activity, why there is a need for conversion? Why is solar not treated at par with the farm when country is saying that using solar will be doubling the income of farmers, and Annadata then treat it like us also as an Annadata and put us under the same category. So then there won't be any policy inconsistency.
Right.
Today we center is doing lot more efforts, but every state has their own priority, and every few years the concerned leadership in the state changes, and you are back to square one in terms of educating. So if you actually have a consistent power council where concurrent topic is handled, have a uniform policy across the country, and we have 720 districts, and entire solar and wind is concentrated in 180 districts. What crime other districts have done?
Right.
So actually we should have distributed solar as the main edge. Why should we develop 10 gigawatt single projects? We should be developing 100 megawatt project in 600 districts, and when those investment of 500 crore goes, it improves the prosperity in that region, and the state government and the leadership of that district also becomes the stakeholder in energy transition. So I think my sense is that right now it's not fully inclusive, except in the rooftop area where our country has come out with an amazing plan of having rooftop everywhere, and that scheme is very effective. I think similar approach is needed in adoption of solar. And in current scenario, the biggest challenge is that the regulation which Mr. Gupta talked about has to be enforced. It's actually an act. If you are in violation of an act, there has to be a penalty, and penalty is quantified. The agency which is responsible for BEEE should be sending out letter to every state which is non-compliant. Probably many of the CMs don't even know that we are non-compliant. When you tell them that, sir, your state talks so much about solar and this is the penalty you are looking at, they are saying why our officers are not telling us. So there is a bit of lack of awareness, and I think if Bureau of Energy Efficiency implements the act, that would be a game changer, and these delays in power purchase agreement will not happen, because the fact of matter is that solar is the cheapest source of energy. If you compare apple to apple, when we talk about thermal, we are talking about levelized cost of electricity of 5.5 and 5 rupees. So when you talk of solar, you talk about 270. If you talk about solar in the levelized cost of electricity concept and use the same cost of capital, inflation and indexation, then the solar is less than 1 rupee. So similarly, when you come to the hybrid of solar and wind, it is less than 2 rupees. And hybrid actually complements for the peaking hour, and it takes care of wind, which is actually one of the best developed industry in India. So I think there are very good solutions. I think communication needs to be improved. My sense is the reason Har Ghar Solar scheme is working out because of very effective communication. If we improve the same level of communication on RPO compliance, cost of electricity using solar wind, and combined it with the storage, now storage has become extremely competitive. Now we can provide round-the-clock green power on demand on tariffs which are lower than conventional power. So the technology is there, the solution is there, the contracting agencies have figured out how to contract it. So I think whole ecosystem is there, and that's why we are seeing also so much of traction. And some of these issues which are coming, and as Minister was saying, that he himself has started talking to ministers and chief minister, and we are seeing it. Actually, there is change which is visible.
Vineet, I want to, I'm looking at the clock and I'm requesting Priyanka, change it a little more and give us another 10, 12 minutes. We can't get such a super panel here. But Amit, you wanted to intervene. This is the disruptive questioning. Now that everyone's put their point of view, anyone can come in at any point, but you wanted to say something on what Vineet was talking about.
No, I think Vineet kind of alluded to all the topics, but I really want to build on one concept here, which he also talked about, is the lowest cost of energy. I think we cannot compromise with cost of energy, and I think we should not just look at the cost which developers charge, but the system cost, because I think that's what the discoms are trying to minimize and reduce. And I think if we solve for it, I think there are 2 or 3 things which come out which we need to really be mindful of and take into account when we are making our own decisions. The first is storage. No question. I think, that message is loud and clear, and I think the pump storage is going to be the lowest cost of storage solution. I think, we are looking at it, but I think the sector should be looking at it very aggressively to make sure that we get a reliable supply of peak power, so that discoms have an opportunity to use more renewable into their solutions. The second is, I think, in the spirit of looking at lowering the cost, I think we talk a lot about hybrid, but I think we need to start switching and talking about co-located hybrids. Just so that, we don't, if you put a solar plant in one location and a wind plant in another location, we cannot be calling them hybrid. Correct. I mean, that, adds to the cost of the system, and I think we should be very careful with that. And I think that hybrid approach has to be very key. And if we combine this with domestic procurement, domestic supply chain, these 3 things, I feel will, together with what we talked about, will really accelerate adoption of renewable power. So,
Suman, you wanted to get in with a particular point?
Yes. So, one thing that I wanted to say is that, today, if you think about it, last year, we added about 15 gigawatts of solar. 15, 1-5.
Right.
Right? Of course, 60 gigawatts was auctioned last year. So maybe a couple of years from now, you'll see a lot of that getting installed. So we may go up to maybe 30, 35, 40 gigawatts and slowly to that level over the next 4 or 5 years. But when you project things outwards, right, beyond 2030, you start looking at, the demand growth that will continue to happen. You start looking at the fact that renewables has to then start replacing fossil fuel-based power. We'll have new demand coming in from electric vehicles and from green hydrogen and those kinds of sectors as more of the energy basket gets electrified. So when you project it out beyond 2030, solar is going to have to add 60, 70 gigawatts every year consistently. Now, if last year we struggled with adding 15 gigawatts because of land issues, transmission issues, storage, and this, that, and the other, think about what the impact of all of this is going to be 5 years out, 7 years out, when we have to do much larger numbers on a consistent basis. Where are we going to get the land from? Where are we going to get the transmission from? All the storage that is required. All of that is going to become a much bigger order of challenge than it is today. And we need to start planning for how do we implement all of this 10 years from now, not just for today. We're trying to solve today's problems in some of the conversations we're having, but we really need to be solving the 10-year-out problems. And there we'll need to think about, do we have more floating solar, for example, and use the reservoirs in the country? We'll have to think about, of course, offshore wind in a much more serious way. So there are a lot of things that we'll have to start thinking about and planning fundamentally differently. For example, the national electricity policy that is currently being framed has to think about how the grid by 2047 will have 90% renewable energy. And that grid is going to be vastly different from the grid of today.
Right.
And those are changes that are going to be very fundamental as we go forward. And that's what we have to start planning for as well, beyond just the planning that we're doing for today.
Excellent.
And that is going to require a very different order of thinking than we have right now.
Praveen, I want you to come in and just to give a comparison. We did about 100 gigawatts. China in the same period did 1,000 gigawatts. How do we get, as he's talking, at 2047 we need to be doing much more than just that. What is the difference? What is the thing that China brings in and what can we learn from them?
I think China is more centralized. So just to give you a comparison, last year, globally, 1.7 trillion was spent in clean energy. China has spent about 700 billion. US spent about 300 odd billion. India has spent 30 billion. So I think this magnitude is very different.
Right.
Suman mentioned that last year we had 15 gigawatt of solar. China last year did 160 gigawatt of solar. So वो zero का difference है. So they are 1 0 more. What we do in small numbers over here, I think we need to start thinking and doing in that. The speed at which the decision taking is happening, decisions are happening in government of India, but by the time it reaches the 28 states, it gets diluted, and Vineet also mentioned about the necessity that how do you bring everyone together on the same page. And I think it is also very important for us that the reliability of power has to be ensured. And,
right.
And that's where I think the FDRE and whatever other solutions, and it is not only just battery solution, it is also pumped hydro, nuclear, because there are a whole lot of things that can be done to ensure that the intermittent power of solar and wind gets combined with storage solutions or backup power that is available. Also, I think one point that we are missing is that while we have been talking of large utility scale generation, the biggest advantage of renewable is that you can do on a distributed basis. The new program of 1 crore households is still very small. I don't know how many we will actually be able to do. The initial numbers are not very good. We are just not even reached a lakh of that. But we have 30 lakh homes over here. We have 30 crore consumers in India. So that much more we can do, and that much more distributed. 700 districts, 6 lakhs plus villages that we have. How do we take this distributed power in those villages, in those districts? And thereby you can have the local generation and local consumption rather than having large transmission systems. So I think there has to be a paradigm shift in the way the energy is being produced and utilized. There will also be, mind you, a disruption in the technology. Today we are all stuck with polysilicon. I don't think in next 5-7 years polysilicon will be the only technology. There will be peroxides, there will be organic materials, nanotechnology, thin film. So a lot of other technologies will come. And I think we need to start investing in some of these new technologies, understand batteries will be different. It will not just be lithium ion. So I think the power sector is going through a lot of transition. What is important is that how quickly as a country we are in a position to take advantage of it and implement it, because the speed at which we are doing is very slow. Just to give you an idea, last year China set up 300 gigawatt of manufacturing capabilities. That means 300 gigawatt of modules, 300 of cell, 300 of wafers, 300 of polysilicon ingots. We, after so many years, we have modules capacity of only about 50 odd gigawatt. I think cell is about 4 or 5 gigawatt, and we have maybe 1 or 2 gigawatt of wafers, no polysilicon. So we are miles away.
Right.
So the whole ecosystem has to really pick up pace, and time is running out and opportunities are huge.
I think this is a good point, Gupta-ji, where you could come in. And one of the things that I think Praveen pointed out is, if you take a look at the volumes that we require, the material that we require, and he while modules we might be fine, but polysilicon we don't make. Wafers, we might just do 2 to 3% of our demand. And as you go up the chain, you still are a heavy importing country. The government, of course, did try to bring in a PLI where it came to solar PV cells, and there was an attempt to do it. How does the government come in? If China is spending trillions, or billions, sorry, how many did you say, 800 billion, was it, right? 700 billion. And we are spending, what, 30 billion, 40 billion? Yeah. So you can see that. How can we sort of scale ourselves up, not just to match China, but to meet the kind of demand that Suman had talked about, 2047, we still have a long way to go.
I think the important point is that simply don't try to compare with that country.
Fair enough.
But we have our own scale. Definitely that scale needs to be scaled up. We are a late entrant as far as the manufacturing is concerned. But as Mr. Praveen Sinha talked about, see, this polysilicon and wafer ingot, the cell and module, these probably are going to be outdated in about next 8 to 10 years. So the new technologies which are coming, we should not fall behind there. We must set up those, because the capacities which we set up today, they will be needed for the next 8 to 10 years. About 40 to 50 gigawatt of solar plants that we have to put each year. That makes up about 500 gigawatts of manufacturing which has to take place. So the capacities which in the current technologies are being planned and put up, they should be put up right up to the bottom of the pyramid, that is up to the polysilicon stage. But the new technologies are something which we must focus on and catch up there. Now there are, as far as this distributed power is concerned, renewable makes, particularly solar, makes quite a lot of sense. But the whole issue is we have a grid, and when we go to the economics of it, then number of things changes. Not only the economics, but the subsidies, the way subsidies are built into it, it changes number of things. Also, it may not be feasible to put up the plants economically in each and every district or in each and every region. There are some of the regions which are well endowed with solar, which are well endowed with wind. They need not be co-located. In some cases, they are co-located, but mostly they are different. For example, we are going to do a project in Ladakh, about 13 gigawatt of solar power, and bring it to the mainland. Now, there, the level of wind is not sufficient enough to put up the wind power plant over there. So we have to compensate it with the batteries. Similarly, Rajasthan, it's well endowed with solar, but not so good as far as the wind is concerned. Gujarat, of course, is better with both. So we have to exploit those resource-rich regions, build up a good transmission infrastructure, which should be well planned out, bring in the battery and the other storage solutions. Currently, battery looks to be the most promising one, but the next set of batteries, probably they will also be, they will improve upon the cost and the efficiencies also. We have to look at those technologies and those chemistries also. Now, once that is there, and the good transmission network is set up, looking to our need for 2047, I would put, by the way, as Suman said, rightly said, about 10 years, look at 10 years, but estimation for about 2047 is already done. That will change. But it's roughly about 2,000 gigawatt of renewable energy which we'll have to put in by then if we want to, in our journey to net zero by 2070. So 2,000 gigawatt is not going to be the end of it.
That's 10 times what we have at the moment, 200 gigawatt or so, right?
Yeah. Yes. So I think the balance, I believe that market would play its role, whether the distributed would go into the system, to what extent it will go, or you exploit the benefits of the regions where it is abundant, different resources are abundant.
I want to bring in Arunabha at this point to look at, okay, we've looked saying that this is a transition technology, what we currently have. We might have other technologies as we get to 2030 and beyond. This could be good till that point. Where are the things that we need to develop our capability? And you talked to this green trade with USA. We have an ISET, Critical and Emerging Technologies. Where do you see some of the big things, 2 or 3 things that we need to focus on and develop that capability?
Yeah, firstly, on the capability, I think the first capability is imagination. I think Praveen has hinted at this, Sumant has hinted at this. We are so locked into a 19th century version of what an electricity system looks like.
Right.
And it's our collective failure. Because we've literally, even our grandfathers did not see an electricity system different from what we encounter today. That is the number one capability. And I don't say this as a tongue-in-cheek remark. I say this for 3 reasons. First, I think this debate that Vineet has initiated is an important one. And Mr. Gupta has also given a thoughtful response. But in order to do distributed, it's not just about, let's take a large-scale project and reduce it to a small-scale project. A distributed project requires its own regulatory ecosystem.
Right.
That currently is not enabling. A distributed project requires its own ability to power livelihoods and small industries, etc. in the region. It's not just an energy story, it's the broader economy story that we are not envisioning, right? That's number one. Number 2, the scale of what we need. Sumant kind of hinted at it. Our net zero analysis suggests that India will need 5,600 gigawatts of solar alone for net zero, and nearly 1,800 gigawatts of wind alone for net zero. Now you might say, net zero, I'll be dead and gone. True. But the point is, we are building a multi-decadal energy transition roadmap. Now, in order to do that, we got to figure out where will all of this stuff come up. So 4 days from now, we're going to release a very important report called the Nexus Study. We've mapped out the entire landscape of India, along with where our forests, go areas, no-go areas, water availability, not availability, population concentrations, what you can, cannot do. And I don't want to give away the headline numbers yet. Call me back again, or I'll publish in India Today next week. The potential for India is even greater than what we need. But we are not envisioning a system, and that requires detailed area-by-area granular analysis to situate this infrastructure, large and small and medium scale. And the third thing we have to do, and there I think both Praveen and Mr. Gupta also hinted at it, is the next generation of technologies. Rather than compete with China to make the same stuff that everyone is making and they've already got overcapacity on it, what's the next generation of solar technologies or storage technologies, etc., that we should be partnering with others on? So there are technology partnerships needed. There's granular assessment of siting needed. There's a reimagination of the distributed and centralized system needed. And then, as I said, the biggest capability that we all need is imagination.
I'm coming to Vineet, but I want you to come down to 2024, the nuts and bolts of this issue. Because it's just not you all generating the power, the solar power, but as you had mentioned, you need the state cooperation. And there are a lot of things there. Simple things like transformers, simple things like connectivity, the last mile and everything else. What would you think, if you had to do something now, 2 or 3 things that you feel this should be done immediately? One is we're looking at far ahead, but what is, some of the real nuts and bolts issues that you think we should be doing?
I think the most important is policy consistency. Actually, many states change it on a weekly basis also. So I think if we have to succeed, all this discussion and debates are good, but the real need is policy consistency and then policy enforcement. We have some of the best policies, like we were talking about on penalizing the states who don't follow the renewable purchase obligation, but when have we done it? So that is number 2. And third is rewarding his stakeholder. Say today the debate is happening. Himachal will say, boss, if you take water from my rivers and make a hydropower plant, you should give me a tax. Then people will have to go to the High Court and get that order cancelled. But then Madhya Pradesh will start and they will put Harit tax. that when you are setting up project in my states, how is my people benefiting? It's going to another state. So I think all these discrepancy has to go away. We won't be able to achieve terawatt vision unless these fundamental issues are not gone. And let's look at another context. Two things, like one, because he provoked me to talk about imagination, and he's an influencer with the government, so, and works on with the US government as well. So if US and world is so concerned about energy transition, what stops them from buying all the future technology of perovskite and a thin film electrolyzer and open source it? It will cost them $2-3 billion. Let them put it on the open source platform and say every country build on top of it and build the technology, and let's make energy the cheapest. That's called disruptive. That's called imagination. And if these countries are serious, they should do, and your platform should become and trend it using your followers that this is what is needed, that technology make it so cheap that the electricity cost is affordable. See, the biggest thing which worries me is the discrimination in the society. We are still using 1.3 megawatt per capita per year. US uses 12,000, China uses 6,000. So that means many of the people are still not using the electricity, and we all sitting in this room with air conditioning are probably using guzzler of electricity. So that discrimination has to go away for India. And innovation should come into that when we are talking about the policy and changes, where developed nation at least do something credible for the global south, which is in the form of open sourcing the technology but buying. I'm not saying just ask companies to give their technology for free. I'm not asking that. And second is the level playing field that every citizen who wants to consume power, they are given power. Because why should someone sitting in Delhi and Bombay should have round-the-clock power, and someone sitting in Gonda should have 16-hour or in Nimach or Katni? So I think those are the kind of challenges also should come into innovation thought.
Well, we've got 4 minutes left, and this is just going to be, I'm going to ask each of you, and maybe you can prepare as well, is that the one big thing you think we should do immediately? I'll just go around. Maybe we'll start with Amit and end up with Vineet that side. So Amit, you go ahead. One big thing that you think should be done immediately that will make a big change.
You know, I think we have talked a lot about what others should do. I'll talk something which I should do, and we will do as well. I think investing in human capital. I think if you look at a lot of this new manufacturing capacity coming in, a lot of these projects coming in, we need skilled people, we need vocational skills at a big scale. We don't have it. We don't have it. We don't have it. If we are going to deliver on everything, imagination, everything else, we don't have people who understand this deeply enough, who can actually do it at scale. Investing in human capital is going to be extremely important for us to make a difference if we are going to be successful.
Praveen?
I think apart from the very many things that we are doing, technology can be a game changer, and disruptive technology can take us to a different level where we don't have to go the same route where others have gone. So I think many of the new technologies where globally work is happening, we should try to get them. We should spend some money, get the best researchers to come and work for us over here. And we need to customize the solution to the Indian requirement. We don't have to copy others. Our requirements are very humongous. Our places are very, very far off from the main cities. And we need to do that so that universal access of energy takes place. And that's an area that we have been working. We find that universal access of energy is not there. People are not able to carry out their routine work. And it's not about creating energy, but it is about creating micro enterprises and the development programs for those people.
Thanks. Suman?
Yeah, in the spirit of trying to say something a little bit different from Amit and Praveen, because obviously what they said is absolutely valid. I would say, if I had to point to one thing, I'd say it's enlightened policy making at the state level. is the one thing I would point to, simply because, you know, a lot of the factors that we require for production sit with the states. Land, of course, local grids, distribution we talked about, you know, then demand coming through for more and more solar. All of those are things that have to be done at the state level. And as Vineet said, state level policy making is very inconsistent and it changes constantly, and therefore that makes it very difficult to operate at that level. And if we need to get to the level and the megawatts that we need and the gigawatts and the terawatts, then you need to have a lot of action happening in the states, which, you know, today are not real participants in this journey as we are and as the central government is.
Mr. Gupta?
I think we all are supposed to say different things, so
Yes.
I would say that I would be very eagerly looking for the report which Ranava is bringing out on the resources and the feasibility of the different projects in different regions, that granularity which he is talking about, and build a very resilient and smart grid which can cater to the requirement and the availability of the natural resources which are exploited there, and then send the energy where it is needed.
Arunapa?
Raj, in a multiple choice question, I'm running out of choices.
Just one.
I'm going to take that all of the above box. One thing I think we've not discussed enough is we can immediately start designing power markets of the future, leveraging not just what's happening on the decarbonization side, but on our India stack, the digital story as well, where you start doing peer-to-peer trading of electrons, etc. You need to start at least experimenting with this stuff.
Vineet?
I would say that we are all serious about energy transition. We should do two things: award out all transmission line which is required till 2035 in 1 or 2 contract. We are doing contract by contract, which is delaying the execution. And second thing is start the carbon market immediately, so that whenever we are comparing solar and wind, we are comparing with something generated from coal. Where is the parity? We are even forgetting about the health impact it's causing us every movement, and that's not fair. It's not a fair comparison of comparing renewable and conventional power. So carbon market and transmission line at the federal as well as every state level.
Well, Amit Singh, Praveen Sinha, Suman Sinha, Arunaba Ghosh, R.P. Gupta, Vineet Mittal. This has been a brilliant panel. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give them a very warm round of applause.